Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Monday, everyone. Happy full moon, and welcome to the Full Moon Positive Book Club. I started this book club about a little over a year ago. Our goal was to meet once a month at a local coffee shop here in Piermont, New York, where I live. We did 2 books, and then COVID hit. And rather than being stuck in my shoes, I went virtual, and once a month, here we are. And my goal with this series is to keep positivity flowing from full moon to full moon and from book to book. And a few months ago, I was on LinkedIn and I discovered the Go Giver series with Bob Berg and John David Mann. And I reached out and asked if they would do the show, and they both said yes. And here we are. We're going to start with Bob Berg today, who is a motivational speaker, a best-selling author. And like I said, he has this incredible series. And I'm going to begin, Bob, by asking you, and everyone's going to have to get this series to know what I'm referring to, but are you Joe or Pindar? Or are you a combination of the two?
You know, I think that's a great question, Richard, because I think at one time we've all been Joe. You know, Joe is sort of the every man or every woman, the Joe or Josephine. We've been starting out. We've been ambitious and aggressive and ready to go and totally frustrated because we're not achieving anywhere near the type of success we feel we should, right? Mm-hmm. And then hopefully we meet someone like Pindar, who's had a lot of experience and is willing to take their time and to kind of guide us along and help us to see where we could do things a little bit differently. So, you know, I think we all at some points in our lives are Joe or Josephine, and at some time we're Pindar.
Well, I mean, you had the good fortune of meeting John David Mann, and the two of you have worked together on this. And I want to talk a little bit about your process and how this all came together to create this incredible series. I have 3 of the 4 books in the series, and I follow you on LinkedIn, and I can't get enough, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
And I will tell you that one of the things that's been popping up for me are all of these synchronistic messages. I will read a passage and then I am confronted with it full on, either through my own experiences or some of the experiences that I'm reading from other people on social media. And I'm finding that we do live in a culture where, interestingly enough, I read just the other day that the most frequently asked question when someone is applying for a job, and this is coming from the person applying, not the person giving the job, is, do you know the answer to the question?
No.
When are my vacation days? So I want to begin by let's start with the title, The Go Giver. Did that come from you or did that come from John?
Well, I mean, a combination, I guess. You know, I had a book out years ago called Endless Referrals. The subtitle was Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. And it was really a how-to book for entrepreneurs and salespeople who knew they had a great product or service. They knew it added fantastic value to you know, people who bought it and used it, but they may not have felt comfortable going out into their local community and creating the kinds of relationships that result in people wanting to do business with them directly and refer them to others. So what was really was a how-to book on how to create relationships that would, well, let's put it this way. The basic premise was that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. That book showed you how to get to that point in a very genuine, authentic way. But it was a how-to book. And I'd always read parables and always loved parables because I think we all know that stories, they connect on a deeper level, a heart-to-heart level. And whenever I'd read parables, Richard, I always felt a connection with the author, a connection with the characters, and a connection with the message itself. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take the basic idea or the premise, the know, like, and trust premise of endless referrals, and turn it into a parable? So
Mhm.
I think with the name, it was really just asking, so what is the basic essence of that entrepreneur or salesperson who can quickly and sustainably create those know, like, and trust relationships? And it comes down to they're always giving. They're giving value to others. They're absolutely focused on bringing value to others. And so the easy part was the title, but the best thing I did for this book was to ask John David Mann to be the co-author and lead writer slash storyteller.
Mhm.
John I had never met him in person at that point, but I had worked with him he was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I would write for. So
Mhm.
every month, I'd submit an article and I'd hear back from John. Just polite and kind, but just great, right? The running joke was that he would always very nicely ask, I put this here. Is it okay if I took this out? And which editors don't have to do, but he'd always do that.
Exactly.
And I'd always, the joke was I'd always write back saying, John, not only is it okay, you write my stuff better than I write my stuff, right? So when I had the idea for the book, he was the only one I wanted to do this with. Now, these days, John, and he'll be too humble to tell you this when you speak with him, but
Well,
John
who's
is
listening?
he's the go-to guy for
Right.
the agents and the publishing houses who they have a business executive or a celebrity or an athlete who has a book inside them,
Mhm.
but that's not their forte to write a book. So John will get the call. So he's the co-author and ghostwriter of numerous New York Times best-selling books. Some of them you don't even know because he's the ghostwriter, right?
Exactly.
But back then he was only known as brilliant within a very small niche. Well,
Mhm.
fortunately, I was one of them who knew. So I asked him. When I say I asked him, I mean I pleaded with him to write the book. Well, he was still very busy at the time, but he and his back then fiance, now his lovely wife Anna, they were on the Gulf Coast of Florida, where her mom had a place, and they actually took a 4-hour ride across state to Jupiter, Florida, where I live. We had about a 4-hour dinner and discussed the book, right? And about 3 weeks later, he called because he still wasn't sure, but he called to say, "Yeah, I think we've got something here."
Mhm.
So it took us only a few months to write the book, and again, that's because of his genius. But it took us about, I think, something like 25 rejections over the course of a year to find a publisher, until finally we met our perfect publishing partner through our agent, and that was Portfolio, which is
Mhm.
a business book division of Penguin Random House. So it all worked out as it was supposed to. But he's the reason that the book sings as it does.
Well, like most parables, the characters that pop up throughout the book are these people that Joe meets on his path, and
Mhm.
what each brings to the table, so to speak, in terms of their experience. I don't want to give away too much of the books because it's so interesting. But I love, for example, where it begins with him telling the story, Pindar telling the story of going to meet his fiance for the first time.
Uh-huh.
And if you can, in your own words, tell us the story so that everyone who's watching, and there's a great lesson to be learned here.
Okay, so Richard, that is one of the many stories in the book that actually happened, but we took it and put it in the book. Okay, so here's what happened. Um, my dad was going on told me the story once when he was going on a date. He was picking up a date, and on the way, and this is what happened with Pindar, who related this to Joe. He bumped into a guy, or a guy kind of bumped into him, a little bit older guy, and instead of Pindar, being a jerk about it, or instead of my dad, my dad was just very, helped the man up, and, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and the person apologized, and my dad had said, "Oh no, of course, that's fine," and so my dad's at his date's house, and uh, the father came home, and my dad's date had said, "Oh, Daddy, this is my my date, Mike Berg." And the father, saw him and said, "Oh, that's the nice young man who was so polite, right?" And well,
Mhm.
that's what Pindar, what happened. Now in the story, Pindar married that woman. That in that case, that wasn't my
Mhm.
mom who Dad was on the date with, but it was the same thing. And the lesson was just, if you take your ego out of it, if you take the focus off yourself and just focus on making another person feel genuinely good about themselves, that's just the way to be.
Well,
And
don't
good
you think
things
that
tend
that
to
is the
develop.
biggest lesson? I mean, for me, when I look back over the past year, for example, I think of this year as a pause. I think of this as a time for all of us to take a collective sigh and to think about those things that are important to us, the things that are in our lives, the things that we want in our lives, and also the things that we don't want in our lives.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's
there is
important
so
too.
much negativity out there right now because of social media and everyone feeling that they need a platform and everything. But this message of giving instead of getting, and we have a whole generation of people, and I don't want to put a blanket statement over everybody, who this sense of entitlement instead of what can I bring to the table.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And with the premise of the go-giver, it's not that that we don't receive. That's law number 5, the
Mhm.
law of receptivity, but it's the last law, right?
Mhm.
And the premise of the go-giver is really, as you've alluded to, that shifting your focus. And now this is the key: shifting your focus from getting to giving. And when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not just a more pleasant way of conducting business and living life,
Mhm.
which it is, but it's not only that. It also happens to be the most profitable way of doing business, and not for any kind of way out there woo woo type of magical mystical reasons either. It really makes rational, logical sense when you think about it. When you're that person who can take your focus off of yourself and place it on helping others, discovering what they need, what they want, what they desire, looking at how you can help them overcome their problems and their challenges, looking at and focus on how you can bring them
Mhm.
closer to happiness, right? People feel good about you. People want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you if that's appropriate, depending upon what you offer and what they need. But they definitely want to be what we call your personal walking ambassador.
But one of the other that's absolutely true. But one of the things that you also talk in the book, and we have, and again, this idea of success that most people have is based on a monetary value, how much money they're going to get paid for a job, and the fact that it's bigger than that. It's way beyond, it's the greatest sense of service that you can bring to the people along the way.
Yeah, well, that's what leads to it, and I think success, however one chooses to define success, because it can be defined in many different ways, but I think that really success covers many different areas. There's financial, there's physical, there's spiritual, there's mental, emotional, social, relational. Probably go on and on, right?
Mhm.
And so I think the rules and or the laws or the principles, what have you, that John and I talk about in the book, I think can be applied to all those. In fact, that's one reason why we had that subplot about Joe and Susan, because even though it's a business book and it's a business publisher, so that is the idea. We really wanted to show that this is something that works across the board. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think it's really it's placing the focus on being of service, of being of value to others. The money will come. It's why John and I
Mhm.
say in Go Giver Sell More, money is simply an echo of value.
Mhm.
It's the thunder to values lightning, right? And that of course is John's. And
I want to talk a little bit about the path that brought you to where you are right now. Um, were you, I mean, as a young man, and going through school and high school and beyond, were you very ambitious in terms of your own pursuits? or were you not taking away from your talents and what you bring to the table? Was it the people that you met along the way, the people, the mentors that you met, the teachers? And who are some of those people that have made the biggest influence on your life?
Well, I mean, I think it's a combination. I was very, very fortunate to be raised by a couple of great parents, so they set the example
Hmm.
really of, and so. But I also had great mentors along the way. I didn't have that one mentor, but I had. It seemed like they always were there when I needed a mentor, when I needed someone to guide me in a certain area. I always seemed to no, I always tried to give value to them too in any way I could. So I always respected the fact that they would take
Hmm.
time. I never took anything for granted when someone was willing to help
Hmm.
me in any way. So yeah, I mean, I was ambitious in terms of what I was looking to accomplish and so forth. I'm not sure I was particularly talented. I mean, probably average talent, but I was willing to work and learn
Hmm.
and. But yeah, I had a lot of people along the way that. But for their help and guidance, what would I have really accomplished?
And when you sat down to begin this series of books, was the goal to write a series of books, or was it
No,
to write a book?
no, it was that one book. And while I think John and I both knew that there was a market for it and that the message we felt would be well received and it would be a successful book, I'm not sure that we really thought it was going to go this big,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know. Um, and of course, it did only because people, got hold of it and told others about it. So again, it wasn't just John, it wasn't just John and me who did it. Although again, I'm going to say his writing made it a great story. Okay, without that, nothing would have happened. But we had a lot of people who grabbed onto it and they spread the word and they told others about it, and it sort of really took hold that way. So, we call it Team Go Giver. It was a group effort of, everyone throughout the Go Giver movement to make this.
Collaboration. That's
Yeah,
the big word,
yeah,
collaboration.
yeah, exactly.
And when did you know that the first book was ready, or did an editor to make that decision for you, that it was ready to be seen by the masses, so to speak?
Well, through the time that we were, it took about 3 months to initially write it. But even during the time we were searching for our publisher, we got critique back, and we always listened. We made sure we didn't just, oh no, they just, we said, is what they're saying here something of value? Now, for some, it was just, yeah, good story, but not our type, not what we want to publish. That is what it is. Others said, well, we felt that here there just wasn't enough. So we looked at it. Could that be
Mhm,
so? We asked people who we respected, and we got critique and feedback, and we made changes. Um, I don't think there were real significant changes, but certainly enough that it made it a better book.
mhm,
And and then, we also had to kind of really retool our marketing efforts in terms of what we planned to do so that a publisher saw this as being a viable business opportunity for them to back us, through publishing. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot of things combined, but we were always open to listen. And again, that's something I really have such great respect for John about, because I don't consider myself to be, anything over above average intelligence. Okay, so to me, I always want but someone like John, and I, you got to know John. This guy is a genius, but he's so humble that he is always open to listening to other people, and he will. So it's something that is really makes him such a joy really to work with.
and that's wonderful. And did your book come out, and hit right away, or were there little bumps in the road to get to the success of the first book?
No, it did hit right away, and I think one reason was because we really both had a lot of people with whom we developed significant relationships with, and we made sure, and again, the publisher was just wonderful in terms of getting copies of the, pre-published copies of the books out to people. So by the time we were ready to go, it was ready. You know what I'm saying? And so we had a whole big, group of people who were ready to look at it and pass it along and so forth. So that really helped. So it did hit. What was interesting was really, I think the first adopters of the book were the people who absolutely did not need it. They were the people who were already very, very successful
Mhm.
people, already great leaders, already and we would get emails from them saying, "This is how I did it. This is how I built my empire. Or this is how I built my company. This is how, but my people won't believe me." Why? Because remember, most people, what they see on TV or in movies, there's always the ruthless,
Mhm.
horrible, terrible, crooked business, right? And so we were their third party credibility. So they were buying hundreds of books, sometimes thousands of books,
Mhm.
putting it through their organization, their businesses. Well, the second wave of adopters were the ones who would say, I either got this book or this book was recommended by my boss or leader of the organization, or what have you. So I think there were a whole bunch of things that came together to help this book get off to a quick start, and have the momentum behind it in order to keep carrying through.
And when, where, and how did the genesis of the second book come about?
Well, the publisher called us because the first book just took off and they wanted a follow-up. And one of the things people often ask, because, with a parable, you can only go so deep by the very
Mhm.
nature of a short parable,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so people did say, well, so, what are some of the examples that you can go deep with and so when the publisher asked if we had another book, we thought, well, and this, by the way, was the only one in the series that's not a parable. Okay, this is Go Givers Sell
Mhm.
More, which
Mhm.
is really sort of an application book for the original Go Giver. So that book has a story. First of all, we go deeper, much deeper into the
Mhm.
laws. But then we also, in every chapter, we have examples of people who either use the principles directly after reading the first book and made a huge difference in their business, or again, were already doing something like this long before they ever heard of the Go Giver. And they share that with us after the book came out. And so the book was real. Go Givers Sell More was really a compendium of
Mhm.
people who've done it, and how you can do it too, that sort of thing.
And what are you thinking about as far as the future of this series and where you would like to see it go?
Well, John and Anna have a fifth book in the series coming out. So there are three parables and one kind of application guide or how
Mhm.
to.
Mhm.
They have a book coming out, which I'm sure he'll be delighted to speak with you
No,
about during
I'm
his
very
segment.
excited to talk about it.
And it's he and Anna, his wife of now, I think 10, 11, 12 year, I'm not sure. But they have a book coming out called The Go Giver Marriage. And I read the initial draft, and it is fantastic. So
I
that's where
I
that's
have to ask how much of the past year has had an impact on the book.
going.
I mean, I'm saying that some people are divorcing and some people are coming closer together.
They are such a wonderful couple, and really, if you're around them, you really see that they're best friends. So they truly bring out the best in each other.
And working on this series, I mean, obviously you've written a lot before this series, and but what is the biggest impact that this series has made on you personally, beyond the obvious things that we know about, but things that have changed you in terms of your outlook on life?
I'm not sure the outlook has changed because the book was more of a reflection of of my outlook. It's allowed me to reach a bigger audience
Hmm.
than I would have beforehand. My first book, Endless Referrals, and it's been a successful book. It sold about 350,000 copies, and that's been a fun ride with that. But it was a very specific audience. It was a sales audience, and
Hmm.
that's where it stayed. Whereas this book, although it's again a business parable, it's just gone wide as far as so it's really allowed me to reach a much larger audience, I think, which has been a lot of fun for me.
Do you see this going to another level, such as Netflix, Amazon Prime? Are there talks for that to happen?
No, we've had a number of producers call us through the years wanting to do, turn it into a movie. But it was always, it was a little bit too small where they didn't have the people already there, and there was going to have to be. And I think with John and I think we both agree that if this was going to be a movie or a Netflix or something like that, we'd want it to be able to be done without having to go through a process of having to raise the funds and doing all of those things. We'd like to know it was a group that had that already taken care of.
And I'm going to assume, based on something you said earlier, that the people that we meet in the Go-Giver are people that you've met on your own path. I'm sure they're probably hybrids of some or what. But was there any particular section of the book that was just so easy coming through you to put down on paper? Or was there one that was a little bit more difficult for you?
It's a great question. And the characters are indeed, compendiums of people, hybrids. I like your word right there better. So, and again, many of the incidents were things that happened, in the co-authors' lives. But we put them into the story with the characters. So it was kind of a combination of that. And then a couple of the characters were totally made up and so forth. The speech by Deborah Davenport, John actually wrote that one in an afternoon.
It's great.
Yeah. He channeled somebody or something, I'm not sure, but he just did a magnificent job with that. And so yeah, I mean, there's certain parts we kind of went through and kind of changed and said, oh, maybe here we need to do this, or that person wouldn't really actually do that, or but it was again, and I don't mean to sound redundant, but having him as the lead writer, it's it makes it a lot easier. Every book I've written before the Go-Giver series have been how-to books. Okay, endless referrals, the art of persuasion. I have my latest one is is Adversaries into Allies, which is a book really on mastering people skills. These are all how-to books. And to me, anyone can write a how-to book. Write down what you know, and you've got your how-to book. You hope most of it's accurate, right? And then you have a good editor that helps you go through it and so forth. But those were all, people say, do you love writing? I said, no, I don't love writing. I don't like writing books. I like having written books. Okay. John and that's not an original. Somebody said that somewhere, whatever. John loves the writing process. I'm a speaker who writes, where John is a writer. And so yeah, it's a whole different thing. So I find the process difficult, whereas I think with John, while there can be difficult spots, this is his ball game.
Well, again, I want to thank you for your time. You're going to be leaving us in a few moments, and then we're going to meet the other half of the team.
Yeah, you get John coming on, man.
You are welcome here anytime. But I want to ask you two things before you go. Number one, do you have a preference as to how people purchase the books? Through your website, through Amazon, through their local bookstores? How can people get all of these books in the series? And I can't wait for the fourth one.
We don't actually, neither John and Anna nor I sell them from our respective homes / offices. Right. The offices are in the homes. But you can get them if you go to either Berg, Burg.com, which is my main website, or thegogiver.com. Either place, you can go on there and find the books and just order them. You can click through to Amazon, and that's probably the easiest way to do it. But we have. You can click through to Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and then there's also, for people who buy in bulk, at the very top, it has a couple of different resellers that we use. John's website, where you could buy the book as well as his 100 bazillion other books he has, is johndavidmann.com. And he also has a free ebook that he's written on how to write books. which is amazing. So make sure to ask him about that, because that is really good.
Now,
And
I'm about to bring him on, but before I say goodbye, I'm going to give you the final word in our portion of this conversation, to expound upon anything that we've talked about today that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to everyone who's watching now. I'm going to leave the screen, give it to you, and then after you speak, John and I will come back. And thank you.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for having me with you. I mean, I would say, if we, when we were speaking earlier about mentors, and I remember one person who I didn't even know very well. He saw me as that young, struggling, but up and coming, very ambitious but very frustrated young salesperson, right? Whose focus was really in the wrong place. And I remember he asked me if he could give me some advice. And I said, yeah, absolutely, because I really needed it at the time. And he said, Berg, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target, he said, is serving others. Now, when you hit the target, he said, you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money. And you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget, he said, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It ain't the target itself. Your target is serving others. And what that said to me, what that really said to me, is that great salesmanship is never about the salesperson. Great salesmanship is never about the product or service, as important as those are. Great salesmanship is about the other person. It's about those whose lives you choose to touch. It's about those people whose lives are better because you are part of it. And I think that when we come at entrepreneurship, at sales, at personal relationships, at life from that premise, then we're really 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
Thank you so much. And now I'm going to bring on John and say goodbye to you, Bob. Have a great afternoon.
Hi, and Richard, thank you so much for having me on. What a pleasure.
Thank you. And here he is, John David Mann. Your mic is muted, so we're going to unmute the mic. You need to unmute your mic.
How are you? I know how to do that. I'm excellent. How are you? Nice to be part of this here.
Well, we just had a wonderful chat. I don't know how much you heard of it, but singing your praises from here to Florida and back again. It's so good to sit down. I have, as I was saying to Bob, I have 3 of the books in the series. Loving them. I can't wait to get the 4th, and I can't wait to hear about the 5th in the series, which he told us about. But I want to ask you, I mean, since we are here in the midst of this pandemic, before we delve into the books, how are you and your wife doing really in the midst of this crazy time that we find ourselves in?
To be honest, fantastic. I know there's been a tremendous amount of suffering all over the planet in the past year, and I'm mindful of that. And we're close to a lot of people who've had, a very, very difficult year in all sorts of ways, on all sorts of dimensions, physically, economically, emotionally, socially, you name it. I got to be honest with you, we've had a great year. And part of that is that, we are, first off, we're blessed to have each other. And it wasn't always that way. I had a friend, I have a good friend who, talking about entrepreneurship, said that the first $1 million is to blow, meaning you need some margin for error if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. And sometimes that error comes in the form of losing money. I've done that. I've lost that money. I've lost those businesses. I've lost all kinds of things. I've also lost 2 marriages. For me, the first 50 years, in the spirit of my friend Scott, who said that about the first $1 million. For me, the first 50 years, it's not to blow, but let's just say was to do some growing. So my wife and I found each other toward the end of our first half decade. And I like to say that I stood up to the plate, and swung twice and missed. And then the third time I connected and hit it out of the park. So
hit a home run.
We are very fortunate that we are each other's best friends. Our marriage.
And do you mind if I ask if she was married previously?
Yeah.
What?
Yep.
Yeah.
We
I've
both
always
were.
said that everybody should have a practice marriage.
Well, you could get in trouble for saying that, but I'd be the first to agree with you. It's kind of like a starter home.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, and don't get me wrong. I have friends who got married in their 20s, and half a century later, they're still blissfully happy.
Mm-hmm.
My hat's off to them. I'm actually not wearing a hat, as you can plainly see.
Yeah.
But that wasn't our path. Our
Mm-hmm.
path was to make lots of mistakes and learn lots of things, and so now we have each other, and that's been part of what's been great about this year. Another part of what's been great about this year is that I'm a writer, and what I do, my thriving environment. I'm an introvert. The environment in which I thrive is being by myself in my room writing, and this thing of the internet and this thing we're doing right now with podcast and email, the facility that we have to stay in touch with each other through the wires. When our ancestors went through the pandemic in 1918,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have that. And I feel just incredibly blessed that we do. For all of its terrors and horrors, the internet has also allowed us to stay connected through this time. So, long answer to a short question. We've been doing great, and we wrote a book together. We've never actually written a book together, and that's going to be the goal.
Ask: is your wife a writer as well?
She is. It hasn't been her focus. It hasn't been her career. She's been more of a coach, a consultant, a speaker. I've really been the writer. She has been an aspiring and sort of closet writer for years, and she's written in the past, but it hasn't been her career. But we teamed up on this book, and it's the Go-Giver Marriage. So it's part of the Go-Giver pantheon. It's part of those books you held up. Oh, there'll be another one in your hand in a year. So yeah, we have had a great time doing that together among other
And is this
projects.
once again, through the eyes of Joe?
Not Joe. I will say this: there are characters in every one of the Go-Giver parables. Mm-hmm. There are characters from previous books that come back in the new book. Sometimes they're a surprise. Often they're a surprise. In this case, in this book, there are characters from all three of the other parables will come back, and there'll be some new ones as well.
Well, I'm going to ask you a same question that I asked Bob at the beginning of our section.
Yes.
Are you more Joe or Pindar, or do you consider yourself a combination of all three?
My favorite scene, this sounds like a canned answer, but just because it's easy to answer that one. My favorite scene in the movie, The Shawshank Redemption, which is one of my favorite movies.
Funny that you mentioned that. My sister just mentioned this morning that was her favorite film.
I just wrote a book, which is not out yet, in which there's a scene in which a young man is watching this movie with his dad, and the scene comes up where Red, the cellmate played by Morgan Freeman, is in his third parole hearing, and the guy asks him basically if he's remorseful, if he's sorry for what he did, and he does this famous scene where he says, "There's not a day goes by that I don't think about that young kid and the stupid kid and the terrible crime he committed. I want to talk to him, tell him how things are, but I can't. That kid's long gone, and this old man is all that's left." And when I look back at myself in my 20s, it feels like a different person. That mm-hmm. guy was maybe Joe. I think a lot of Joe in myself in my 20s. I hope I see a little more Pindar in myself now. I like to think I relate more to Pindar today than to Joe. So that's, I think of Pindar and Joe as really being kind of the same person on two parts of the path.
Now, you mentioned that you are an introvert by nature.
Yeah.
Did you start out to be a writer?
No, in fact, and I didn't start out to be an introvert either.
It happens.
If you'd asked me in my 20s, my Joe life, or my 30s, because I was very active as a public speaker. I was out in front of audiences since I was a kid. I was a concert cellist. I was a classical musician.
Wow.
My background is I started out as a classical musician. I played the cello. I was a composer. In my teens, I dropped out of high school and spearheaded a group of kids who started our own school. and we created this new high school, and I was, kind of the ringleader of that operation. So I was constantly giving addresses to groups of parents and teachers and all kinds of people. I traveled to do this, and we started that school. I went to it, graduated from it, went back and taught at it. And then I got involved in nutrition, and I was very involved in that field. And in that field, I was giving public talks and traveling around the country. So I was a speaker and very out front. But I was always the guy who somehow got the task of editing the newsletter or the circular or the article for the magazine or whatever. I was always kind of editing stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you, Richard, I never sat down or stood up and said, I want to be a writer. I kind of backed into it. I edited, and then eventually I carved out a career editing other people's stuff. I edited a number of journals that I co-founded. That's how Bob and I got to know each other. Bob contributed some articles to a marketing magazine we had, Network Marketing Magazine, and I was the editor. And I edited all kinds of stuff, and most of it was written by people who were good at what they did, but what they did wasn't writing. So most of the writing wasn't actually technically that great. So I was very busy taking writings from people who had good ideas, but it needed work, it needed polishing, it's like rough carpentry. So most of the time, I don't know if they ever noticed what I did or not, if they ever noticed that what came out in the published journal was different than what they submitted. But there was one guy who contacted the magazine and said, what did you do? This guy makes my stuff sound better than I make my stuff. And we got to be good friends. I edited some stuff for him. I edited a book of his and a booklet of his. And then I like to say that Bob Berg ruined my career. I was planning. This was my plan, Richard. And you probably know the expression, man plans and God laughs, right? So God was at this time holding his sides, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. The early 2000s, my plan was I was going to be a screenwriter. I was going to go to Hollywood and be an A-list screenwriter. That's what I was doing. And I was pursuing that actively. I was writing screenplays. I'd been out to Hollywood. I'd been to conferences. I had a mentor. And Bob asked me if I would work on this book with him. He had a book idea. He says, I got this idea for a book, but it's not a how-to book. It's not the kind of book I write. I need you not to edit it. I need you to write it with me, because I don't know how to do this. Mm-hmm. But I got this idea. I don't even know where it goes exactly. He'd written some notes. He'd written some chapters. He had a start. It's like, you know how every joke has a setup? He had a setup for the story. He wasn't sure where it went, but so that turned out to be the Go-Giver.
Well, he said that first meeting you sat down for, he traveled, and I think it was a 4-hour lunch that you had.
Yeah.
Were you already on board when he arrived, or did he have to sell you on the idea of committing yourself to this?
I had to sell myself, and I wasn't on board. I'll tell you how that was. I didn't feel that I had time to do this project for Bob. And I looked at it that way, as doing a project for Bob. That's how I saw it at that time. I had other stuff going on in my life. But I said to my fiance then, now my wife, I said, but it's Bob. And I love Bob. Bob was a good friend. And so I got to give it a hearing. And we had traveled down to Florida at that time to visit her parents. And Bob lived in Florida. So we took the drive. It was like a 3 or 4 hour drive. We drove down to visit Bob. And we spent the day with him, as he described. And we kind of chewed the fat, talked over ideas and batted things back and forth and had some thoughts. He told me about a few characters that he knew, people he knew in real life. Deborah Davenport, for example, is based on an actual realtor that he knows, and so forth. So I went back home over Christmas, over New Year's. I was busy, did this and that. And then somewhere in January, February, I had a little free time. So I said, let me mess with that. So I took what he'd done and I put it over here, and I took the ideas we'd noted over here, and I started with a blank page and I started drafting a chapter. And that scene was what turned out to be the law of authenticity. And Deborah Davenport's address to the auditorium, where Joe and Pindar are sitting in back. Deborah Davenport, in my mind, is modeled on my wife, because authenticity was what she's all about. So that kind of spilled out, and I sent it to Bob and said, what do you think? And he said, I think it's fantastic. And so we said, let's go. So I did some more, and then I did some more, and I would do stuff and I would send it off to him on email, and he would type some ideas and send it back and say, this is great, keep going. And by the time we finished a draft, which took us maybe 4 to 6 weeks, it was a short thing. By the time we finished a draft, it was awful. I didn't know that then. I know it now. And in I heard him mention my ebook on how to write. In that book, I actually show you the first page of that first draft, what it was like, and then what we did to rewrite it and make it the published version. And it really is a transformation, like a Hollywood, makeup artist, because the first draft was awful, but it was also good. It had good stuff in it. It was like a rough young person who's got a great person inside them, but they're still really rough. And at the end of that draft, I was like, I am on board with this. I love this story. I love these characters. I'd never written fiction. I'd never written stories. I'd always written nonfiction, somebody else's story, how to, about leadership, about success, about, if you do this, then that will happen. But I was bitten by the bug. And so that was it, man. Here I am 30 books later, and this is what I do. I write books.
Have so many questions I want to ask you. We're going to run out of time. But
I'll stop talking.
No. I love listening to everything you have to say. When did it shift from being a project for Bob to being a project with Bob?
Probably after I typed the first 2 or 3 words. I mean, instantaneously, because I'd thought about this person, Joe, and Pindar didn't have a name yet. Pindar had a title. He didn't have a name. I thought about this older guy, and I thought about Deborah Davenport and her story. And, it started to come to life. And the moment there was a spark and the story started to come to life, I was in. And the cool thing is that Bob and I worked together so well and I can so easily imagine this not working, but it does work. It's been working for over a decade. Is that even though I felt complete ownership of it, it's like I was doing a back and forth with this story on the page. Bob was also completely there in it. And there has never been yet, ever been since. There's never been a conflict between us in terms of, well, I think the story should go this way. I think the story should go that way. It just syncs. It just works. We're very different people, but we have very similar values, and we have very similar ideas and experiences about how human beings operate in the world.
Do you think it's very much a process of checking your ego at the door when you sit down to work with someone?
It is. And it's also a process of empathy. It's a process of really, Bob talks about, as Bob just talked about now, about this teacher of his who said, the secret to success is you don't make it about yourself. That wasn't what he said. He says you don't make it about money. But then Bob says that the point is sales is never about the salesperson. Sales is never about me. It's always about the person well, that's the thing about writing. Say if you're going to write somebody's memoir, a real person. What you want to ask yourself is, who is this person? Let me interrupt myself and go back a couple of decades in my career. Back when I was a public speaker, the best realization I ever had about public speaking, the best leap I ever made in my ability to do public speaking, was when I realized that the critical question to ask at the front of the room, at the beginning, just before the beginning of the talk, is not, how am I looking? What have I got to say? What are my opening words? What is my message? What is my process? None of that garbage about like me. The critical question I want to ask is, who are these people out there? Who are they? Who are they? What do they need right now? And then maybe as a second question, what can I possibly give them? What can I possibly supply that they need? But first question is, who are they? It's the same thing with sales process. The sales process, the first question is, okay, who is this person? You ask things like, you ask them about their life. You ask them about their family. You ask them the questions you ask them, not because it's a technique, because you're trying to, establish rapport and, and get to know what they need so you can supply Now, it's like, you need to know the answer to the question, who is this person?
Absolutely.
And that's what you do as a writer. That's what you do as a writer. You say, what is this story?
I don't know if you saw the Oscars. Did you watch the Oscars last night?
Only some. In and out. I was in and out.
Well, Ann Roth, who is a phenomenal costume designer, wins an award last night. And they said that she said that when she...
I saw this.
Did you see it?
Yes. It was great. What's the point of the costume?
What's the point of the costume? Do they take it off and throw it on the floor? Do they hang the costumes? And I thought, wow.
Yes.
What a great way of approaching who this person is.
And how can I help the audience learn something new about them? Yeah, I love that. That was brilliant.
And what is your process as a writer now that you are writing fiction, which is not fiction? it's all real, folks.
Yeah.
But as you are writing, are these characters seeping into your sleep? Are you able to compartmentalize them? Are you able to, what's your process in terms of hanging on to them and letting go?
Yes, there's, I'm not really facile with writing. I'm not, someone like, you take Mozart. Mozart famously would do things, he was known to write down a piece of music while composing another piece of music in his head. Mm-hmm. He's starting a new piece here, and meanwhile he's writing down a piece he wrote like an hour ago or yesterday. I am just definitely not Mozart. The stories don't like live in my head and dance and come to life, and I sleep with them. It's a little bit of an effort for me, and to do it, I have to get into a quiet space and kind of sit down with a blank pad of paper, and sort of, it's almost like meditation, really. I have to get my mind quiet enough, my heart receptive enough to sort of say, and ask good questions like, Joe, what does he really want? What is he really up to? And then, I kind of wait. It's almost like sitting by a side of a pond and waiting for the fish to bite. Mm-hmm. I kind of wait for me to get a sense of the character and what's going on. To that extent, then they start to come to life for me. And then I'll go off and live my life the rest of the day. And there's probably stuff happening in the back of the brain, but I'm not necessarily aware of it. And then usually when I'm walking my dog or doing an errand in the car, I'll suddenly go, oh, I know. So that the stuff does percolate and then come to life. And you have to let it. So
we're going to run out of time in a few moments. I want you to come back when we can have a full hour to talk. I mean, because I love the process. You've always got a platform here.
Right.
But I'm going to ask the same question that I asked Bob. What is the biggest impact that this series of books has made on you, that has surprised you the most about you personally? And I'm talking about your personal life.
Yes. I guess maybe I can give two answers to that. They kind of come in sequence. I mean, the first is that it was sort of a shock to me, or anyway, a surprise, and a nice one, that it worked. By that, I mean, I could write a story. I could write a book. I had written other books, but I mean, a story that holds together, like a fabric, like a cloth, beginning, middle, end. Now I'm writing novels, which are many times the length and many times the complexity, but it's not that different. So it was the fact that, my wife the other day said to me, I think you have at least 20 more novels in you. And my response was, they're not in me. I know what you mean, but it feels like they're all out there. I've just started to get to a place where I can filter them. I can catch them and manifest them. And it feels like that. Writing The Go-Giver showed me that it was possible I could do that. I could actually write a story. Writing the second book, which is now called The Go-Giver Leader, was an enormous challenge, because it was like, okay, that worked once, but was it like a magic spell? Can we do it again? And then there was another one, and then there's been another one. There's been other books, and the whole series has changed my life in the sense of I kind of discovered because Bob ruined my career. I discovered what it was I was put here to do. Mm-hmm. Bob gave me this gift. I discovered what it was that's. I knew there was a reason I was here, and this is what the reason is to write these books. And then the second piece of it is that the response, the dialogue with people, the response from readers People ask, why what's the biggest satisfaction in writing a book? It's readers. The book is just little black squiggles on a white page. It's just dots and letters and squiggles and hieroglyphs on a page that mean a lot to Bob and me. But it doesn't really come to life until we get emails from people saying, I read this book in a weekend, and you don't understand. I'm a person who doesn't read books, but I read this book, and it's like a revelation, and they tell us what it's meant in their lives. That gives me chills. That's like it's like having a conversation with the whole world. So that has completely changed my life.
No, well, I will tell you, it is an amazing series. The Go Giver Leader, the Go Giver Sell More, the Go Giver, and I can't wait to get the other books as well. We are at the end of our show, and I want to be respectful of your time,
Yes.
and I want to be respectful of everyone else's time. But before you go, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. If you please order these books, they do stand alone on their own, or you can get the entire series. And I always say, go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the 8th person that pops up, then go to Amazon and order 2 books. Keep one for yourself and send one to the 8th person on your list. And if you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube. Hit the like button, and I'm going to have a little contest. If you leave a comment, I will automatically enter you in a drawing to get a free copy that I will send to you as my gift to you for tuning in, because it's all about paying it forward. And that's the biggest message that I get from these books. It's about paying it forward. As my dear friend David Friedman says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. You never know what someone else is going through. But if you're going to be in that boat, make sure that you take a skipper along with you. So, anyway, if you are around tomorrow afternoon, everyone, please tune in. I am going to be sitting down with a publicist extraordinaire, Josh Ellis. He has a one-man show called Call My Publicist, the story education of a Broadway press agent. He worked with David Merrick on Broadway, one of the most prolific producers of all time. His stories are amazing. He's so many stories that I have learned from him on, again, paying it forward and the work that we all do together. Before we sign off, John, I'm going to do the same thing that I did with Bob. I'm going to leave the screen, and I'm going to give you the final word. Anything that you want to say about anything that we talked about today that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to everyone who's watching right now. And again, I want to thank you for your body of worth, what you bring to the table, the gifts that you've given me, and that you will give everyone else, and that you will continue to give. Thanks for being here today.
All right. Well, look at this. I now have the stage. I guess I'll say this. Maybe not all of you have read the book, but some of you have. Some of you maybe are in the beginning of it. But there is in the book a student and a teacher. Joe is the student, and Pindar, the older man, is the teacher. And in the course of the book, Joe meets mentors. He meets more teachers, one every day, and each one of them imparts some message to him. And Pindar, one of Pindar's central messages to Joe is, when you learn this key, this piece of the puzzle, put it into practice right away. This day, the same day, before the sun sets, before you go to sleep, put it into practice. They get to Friday, and they don't know who. There's going to be another guest on Friday, but they don't know who it is. And I'll give you a little spoiler, but trust me, it won't ruin the book for you, I promise. But this is a little spoiler, which is this. They get to Friday, and Joe's wondering, who is the Friday guest going to be? And it turns out that the Friday guest is Joe himself. Because Joe already knows everything that Pindar is teaching him. I mean, he just doesn't know that he knows it. It's already there. Bob and I get this all the time. People don't come to us and say, wow, that book said stuff that I never thought of before, and it's made me really change my thinking. It's funny how often we don't hear that. What we hear people say is, I read that book. That's exactly how I thought things were. That's what I always thought, people say. I just never knew how to put it in those words, but it clicks for me. Yes, it does. It clicks because we all know these things. This is not an original idea. The idea of living with generosity, the idea of putting other people's interests first, and that being a good thing not only for them, but a good thing for you too. This is not an original idea. It's been around for thousands of years. But maybe the story will help something click, or help you see something in a new way, or help some piece of that puzzle come falling into place. Then here's what I want to say about that. As the pieces click, as you get thoughts or get ideas, know that to put it into action doesn't have to be some big dramatic thing. You don't have to become like Mother Teresa overnight, or do something that is so dramatically philanthropic that you blow everybody's mind. It's not like that. It doesn't have to be dramatic. What makes this stuff valuable is that it's doable. What makes it useful is that it's practical. What makes it effective is that you can do this, and you can do this in little ways. Sometimes the littlest gestures, the smallest things, make the biggest impact. So with that, thank you all so much for your time. Richard, our skipper, thank you muchly.